Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well this morning. If you have been on one of these webinars before, you know we always give the first minute or so to let people trickle in. So we're going to do that here for just another moment. So no awkward silences happening in the beginning, just letting everybody kind of get in and get started. So we'll kick this off in about a minute to a minute and a half. But again, thank everybody for being here this morning, at least in Tallahassee on this relatively lovely Tuesday morning. A little overcast, but the weather is starting to get very nice up here. So again, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll get started at about 10:01, maybe just a little after. All right, well, as people trickle in, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. My name is Kyle Baltic. I have the pleasure of serving as the Senior Vice President of the Florida Chamber Foundation, and really excited for this conversation this morning, mainly because it's not only one that I think is impacting Florida and the nation to an extreme extent right now, but it's something that is also, caught up in the news right now. Everybody's talking about. But on top of that, I think I have two of the most thoughtful experts in the state when it comes to this matter on our call with us this morning. So really excited to be having this conversation and talking a little bit about our recently released report, Untapped Potential, what it means for the state of Florida, and most importantly, what we're going to be doing about it in terms of policy, business, and philanthropic efforts to overcome some of the child care crises we have in our state. So if we jump to the next slide here, just want to kind of give a brief overview of the work that we do here at the Florida Chamber Foundation. Again, I want to thank those who serve on our Quality of Opportunity Advisory Board. These are those business and philanthropic leaders who not only invest in our work, but are truly the brain trust of everything we do in equality of opportunity. And as we talk about this issue today, you think both in terms of childhood poverty and early learning. This is one of those intersection points. The child care crisis we know disproportionately impacts low-income communities and families, but at the same time, it impacts everyone. And it impacts not only our opportunity to advance economic prosperity today, but also in the future as we think of how do we get to that third grade reading standpoint and how do we ensure all of our students are starting off their educational pathways on the right foot. So thank you to those advisory board members who serve on this project. If we jump to the next slide, this is me, so thrilled to be here. Thanks, everybody. And if we jump really quickly to the next slide here, just kind of want to start off our conversation. So the Florida Chamber Foundation, and I'm sorry for those that it may be blurry, it could be internet settings on our side, potentially your side as well, but we will do everything we can on our side to fix up the blurriness. Saw some comments there in the chat. So we'll do everything from our standpoint, but we do hear you. The Florida Chamber Foundation, if you're unfamiliar with the work we do, is the think tank, the research and data analytics entity of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. So the foundation is the non-lobbying arm, completely nonpartisan, and really just a bunch of researchers, economists, and experts really trying to understand what is impacting the state of Florida, where are we progressing on this pathway to becoming the 10th largest economy in the world by 2030, and what needs to be done and what we need to keep investing in. So one of those pillars is talent supply and education. And when we talk about talent supply and education, we truly mean the entire continuum of talent supply and education. What does it look like for those mothers who just gave birth and the opportunities for those children that are newborns in the state? Of course, measuring educational outcomes at this standpoint at kindergarten readiness, our first data point we can really grasp on. But if you go to something like the floridagapmap.org, you could see the percentage of 3-year-olds enrolled in school within your zip code. So really trying to measure as early as we possibly can, all the way through career and technical education, through adult learning. So it is an entire continuum with the idea of if we want to grow to the 10th largest economy in the world by 2030, which is that North Star we have set, we know we need a talented workforce to do so, and it is our responsibility to educate that workforce as well as we possibly can and from the earliest days possible as well. If we jump to the next slide here, what we see is, and you all I'm sure are seeing across your preferred news outlets, is that we're dealing with a crisis when it comes to childcare right now. And we're experiencing this in so many different ways, whether you are personally experiencing it, having a child or a grandchild of your own, whether you have a colleague who has young children, whether you are thinking about having children and dealing with the, oh my goodness, Can I afford to access high quality childcare? Even if I can afford it, can I still get a slot within my community? Again, we're not alone here in Florida. It's a crisis in every single state in the country. In fact, Michelle, who is on this call, and I just came from a national invitation conference where there were business leaders from all across the states talking about this issue and what they're getting done within their states. I will tell you, I don't think anybody has landed with the perfect answer yet, but here in Florida, we are working to resolve this crisis, which I think does give us at least a step in the right direction and an advantage. If we go to the next slide, what we do understand is that in terms of educational performance, early learning works. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that VPK itself is an absolutely perfect system, but what we do understand is that it does work. Those who went through VPK, which is about half of our kindergartners that are matriculating into public kindergarten or kindergarten readiness programs, about half of those that go through. Of those that go through, 62% are ready for kindergarten. Of those that don't go through, only 37% are. So we can see nearly twice as many students are ready for kindergarten that go through VPK versus those that aren't. So again, we understand that accessing early learning before kindergarten is vital to long-term success. The question now becomes, what happens if we were able to expand beyond VPK, if we were able to get students in early learning at a young age? The other question becomes, all right, we understand this idea of both brain development and educational success. That's something we've talked about for years. But there's also this other piece of the factor. What happens to today's economy when you support parents in accessing early learning across the state of Florida? And we recently did a report called Untapped Potential, which studied that exact problem. It is the only report that's ever been done in Florida, which uses first-party information here for the state. And what I mean by that is we went out into the field, we surveyed, we did first-party research within the state of Florida to understand specifically our state's issues. So we're not taking any other state and comparing it to us. We are looking at our state and saying, what is the opportunity? And what we find is that it's pretty significant. If we go to the next slide, what we found is the economic impact of accessing early learning in the state of Florida right now is costing our state about $5.4 billion a year. And that is just in direct economic impact, not indirect or induced, which if you want to catch me up afterwards, happy to do so and explain all those fun economic terms. But what this says, and one, is this is probably a relatively conservative estimate, but two, it's pretty dramatic. We find that employer turnover and absentee costs cost the state about $3.4 billion a year, and we're missing out on nearly $1 billion a year in tax revenue as well. And again, back to this idea of it is not just an affordability challenge, it can be an access challenge. Here's a quote from one of the parents we spoke to when we did this report. And I hate reading directly off slides, but I think it's so important to understand it. I worked full-time and went on maternity leave for 12 weeks. We could not find childcare, so I had to work part-time from home while caring for my son. Eventually, I was asked to return to the office. This was not possible as we still did not have childcare, so I had to quit my job. We've been on wait lists for over a year and still waiting. Again, this is a willing participant within the workforce, somebody who desires to be in their office and would do so if they feasibly could, but they cannot. So again, we talk about this issue from an affordability challenge, and that absolutely exists, but there is also just an access challenge within this. Something to keep in mind as we talk about the rest of this topic today. As we jump to the next slide, kind of want to talk a little bit about, that $5.4 billion, what it means for our state, and what it means for employment long-term within the state of Florida. I think one of the most interesting statistics to take off this slide is that over the past 12 months, 28% of those with children under the age of 5 have said they've experienced a significant change in their job. And that can be maybe reducing hours significantly or leaving the workforce. That's pretty dramatic. Again, it's also not just those that are leaving the workforce, it's absenteeism even if they stay within the workforce. 64% of families with children under the age of 5 said they've had to miss work over the past 3 months due to childcare challenges. And as we jump to the next slide, we learn a couple different things that are very, very interesting. One is that it is the number one reason people are leaving their jobs in the state of Florida right now, at least for those with children under the age of 5. The number one reason, above I desire a new work opportunity, above I am dissatisfied in my role. It's above I accepted a new job somewhere else. So again, really, really dramatic. Secondly, when these individuals leave work or the workforce, they're doing so for quite a long time. Yes, we see that about 38% expect to return within 6 months. But after that, it starts to be pretty dramatic. And we know that about 40% plan to be gone for more than a year. And 13% don't even know when they would be back into the workforce. So again, as we think about our workplace, if we're a business leader, what would happen if you lost somebody for more than a year? As you think about an individual yourself, if you left the workforce for a year or more, what type of skills are you losing? What does that do to your resume? What does that do to your talent pool as you go to come back? And as the state right now, we have less people looking for work than open jobs. There's many reasons for that. But the child care crisis itself is not helping us in that field. So something we definitely want to work on. As we jump to the next slide here, I also want to point out an interesting note that I think breaks down some of the disillusions we have over who this is impacting right now. We did some case studying out with some partners. And when you asked individuals, picture in your head the individual who leaves the workforce to take care of their child. Many said upper middle class to higher socioeconomic family and a mother. And again, what we find is it's kind of exactly the opposite, at least in one of those respects. In one of those respects, it is low-income families that are leaving the workforce at a much, much higher rate than those middle-income or high-income families. And again, that makes perfect sense. If you're on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, it might actually save you money to stay home than trying to pay or access childcare. Secondly, and very, very interesting to note, we asked those participants in our survey, and it was a representative sample size for the entire state of Florida, who expects to leave the workforce over the next 12 months by gender. And we were a little surprised. 14% of females, but 23% of men. So again, as we do see right now, yes, traditionally women have left the workforce at a little bit of a higher clip than men traditionally in the past. That may not be the case for Florida moving forward. Again, these are expectations, so we don't know that this will come to fruition 100%, but such a dramatic difference between 14 and 23% was something that absolutely raised eyebrows here among our team. If we go to the next slide here, just a few other notes I want to talk about. One, what could this mean if we got it right, if we made childcare and early learning accessible for families across the state of Florida? It means we're going to get people back to work. These are labor force participation rates amongst families in Florida with children under 6, with maybe multiple children, ages 6 and then 6 to 17, and then with just children on that upper scale, that 6 to 17 once they're in the K through 12 system. And what we find is that if you have a child under 6 and potentially multiple children, you are participating in the workforce at a lower rate than anybody else, at 67%. If you just looked at that difference between 67 and 77% there, where you have formal education opportunities and access to quality education in that K through 12 system, that could mean about 150,000 parents re-entering the workforce. That is huge. That in and of itself is nearly the gap between those looking for work and those open jobs in the state of Florida right now. So we know it's going to have a dramatic impact. If we go to the next slide, just kind of want to wrap this up and set up the conversation with some of our amazing guests today. Again, our economy from a fiscal and economic state is losing about $5.4 billion a year. Over a 12-month span, we're losing about 28% of those parents. Over a 6-month span, about 15%. Another interesting piece here I did want to note is that 48% of those parents that are in school either reduced or stopped out of school completely. So again, as we talk about this issue today, it's not just impacting our workforce, but it's also impacting those parents who may be going through schooling or re-education. So something that we just want to note. As we go forward in our conversation today, what I would implore you to do is reach out to our team. If we go to the next slide here, we have our Business Alliance for Early Learning, and we are gathering not only business leaders to raise awareness of this issue and really be key thought leaders within their communities, within the state on this issue. But we're also reaching out to those philanthropic networks and to those public entities that are working on this issue to better understand what are some of the challenges that are occurring within your community and how can we support you in overcoming those challenges. Again, we know there's three legs of the stool here. We know there's going to need to be action from the policy perspective, from the philanthropic perspective, and from the business perspective. But if we can align all three of those legs and really move the needle in a positive way, we're going to do something that no other state has done, and we're going to really support our economy in doing so. So excited to get to the real experts today. Really excited for my first guest today, Representative Dana Trabalsi. Representative Trabalsi is not only somebody who I admire personally as a friend, but somebody who I think is one of the most thoughtful and compassionate leaders on this issue. And I think I really want to hone in on that point. Thoughtful. She is constantly asking the questions, seeking to understand, and is really an expert amongst her peers within this issue, but compassionate as well. Understands that this is an issue that economically is impacting our state, but just day to day is impacting stress and health of families around the state of Florida. So thrilled that she has joined us today. And Representative Trabalsi, just thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for being such a great resource to all of us. It's nice that the chamber not only will tell us what our pitfalls are, but you come to the table with so many solutions too that help us really work together. So thank you. I'm going to say I really thoroughly enjoyed reading Untapped Potential, although it somewhat painted a pretty bleak outlook. But I think that we have a landscape where we can go nowhere but up.
I agree 100%. And it's one of those things where, at least I'm excited in the state of Florida that we can face some of those harsh realities. It's better to know the real impact and challenge that we're facing within the state, because that way we can start to resolve it. And that's kind of exactly where I want to dive in. We went over Untapped Potential with the audience here just a moment ago. Again, about $5.4 billion a year it's costing our state. But more interestingly, it goes into understanding the gap between, demand and availability within the state of Florida. But again, this isn't something that we needed science or a report to understand, maybe to quantify. But it's something that we're hearing within our communities and we're hearing within our business leaders. So I just kind of want to ask you, as a representative who obviously is talking to your constituents pretty often, what are you hearing on the ground from your constituents about this issue and how it's impacting your communities?
So my constituents are talking about it a lot, and not just the constituents that are in my district, but every day when we're in Tallahassee, the different groups that come and talk to us, this is a number one issue that's on their radar. Businesses are suffering, families are suffering. And, anytime I get the opportunity, I'm going to tell you that I'm a grandmother of 7 and all of them are under 5. So this affects my family as well. They're all my constituents. So I'm working for them too. But when you were reading through your slides and you had the quote from somebody, I started taking some notes, and it prompted me. A friend of mine recently had their third child, and the older children are in school. And so now she has, a newborn, and she needs to go back to work soon. And she can't go back to work because she's on a wait list. So there's that issue. Fortunately, if they were able to go and get off the wait list, they would be able to afford the childcare, but there is no childcare available for them. And then secondly, because she can't go back to work, she can't practice in her field. She's in the medical profession. This is a profession where we already have a shortage of workers, right? So now we're depleting that. Then if you even take the circle even further, her husband is going to have to get a second job so that she can stay home with a child that she can't find childcare for and not go to work in a profession that is very much in demand. And now we're tackling the issue of fatherlessness because her older children are not going to have a father at home. So it is a full circle. It doesn't just affect one person or one family. It really affects our entire community. And it's somewhat of a perfect storm because on one side, it's the accessibility, but on the other side, our childcare system is a horrible business model because we can't pay our employees enough to keep them. So the turnover is there, but if we paid the employees what they were worth, if our providers did, then our parents couldn't afford to send them there. So we are just really in this mess.
Yeah, I think, and again, I appreciate you kind of just addressing it there head on. Like, it is a mess, and it's one of those things where I think at times all of us, and look, be agnostic of the issue. It can be childcare, it can be really anything we talk about. We talk about, okay, well, we want Florida to be leading the pack, we want Florida to be ahead, or oh, well, it's in Florida, it's not so bad compared to other places, and that may be true, but that's not really the point we're trying to get to here. We're trying to get to a place where it's accessible for all, not necessarily comparing ourselves to any other state, because nobody's getting it right. So you don't want to be the fastest person in a slow race. You want to be achieving your goals. And I think you also laid out there why this is so important for the business community to care. And sometimes I think when we were first talking about this issue, we had business leaders saying, well, that's not an issue in my field, or it's not an issue in my workplace. We pay well. So, we pay enough for our parents to be able to afford childcare, or, we live in a community where, God, it's such a populous area. It's not like this rural divide where you might not be able to access it. And what I think we're learning through all this research and this understanding is that sometimes that's not enough. Again, affordability, without a doubt, a massive challenge, and something that we're working to address as we discuss this issue. But just access alone and having enough facilities is so important. So when you talk to those business leaders that are within your community, how are you helping them understand, look, this might be one of the greatest issues to impacting your workforce and your ability to do business in the state of Florida?
Honestly, it's been a tough conversation because they just don't understand. Either they've never been in that position, or they just can't wrap their head around childcare is the golden ticket. It's the key to open all doors. So it's been difficult.
And what I have found is that I would agree. It's been difficult, but it's getting better. And it's getting better through a few different avenues. One, look, selfishly, I will tout the chamber here. I think we've done a lot in this respect. I tallied it recently. I think I spoke to more than 45 groups, business-led groups, this past year. And this issue comes up in every single conversation. So we're certainly raising awareness there. But they're also hearing about it from their people on the ground. Whether people are saying, look, like that mother that we referenced in our report, I would love to come back to work, but simply can't leave my child here. But that's not an option. So I think they're hearing it from their constituents. They're also hearing it when it comes to work flexibility. And look, I praise those businesses that have been able to do flexible scheduling and all of that. But we know for some of those offices, some of those workplaces, that just doesn't work. It's not as easy to have a remote nurse as it may be, to have a remote individual within marketing or whatever the field may be. So, I think looking at what we can do to resolve those barriers is a really, really big issue that we're looking to address. I also want to go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I think we also have worked so hard to change the paradigm, but we're all saying childcare, right? We're not saying daycare. So I think we really need to put some weight into that, and also realize the value that children are getting from good quality childcare. It is education. Those first 5 years are the most important years. It's when kids are going to have the most amount of brain development that they'll ever have in their entire life. And when we're denying that from children because there's not accessibility or affordability, and then those same children are not able to read on grade level in third grade because they didn't get that good quality education, regardless of their parents, were able to work from home or not. And COVID taught us that we could work from home, but it's not necessarily the best thing for our children and how we're going to tee them up for success in the future.
100%. And, obviously we learned that lesson during COVID. Being there doesn't necessarily make you a teacher. But again, even with the limited data we understand about VPK to kindergarten readiness, and again, VPK is a good but not perfect program that we have here in the state of Florida. If we expanded opportunities and allowed, those 1-year-olds, those 2-year-olds, those 3-year-olds to begin that brain development and that education, because again, it is education. Think about what our results would be. So, it's one of those things where I think contextually we can all understand it, but I appreciate you bringing that point up because we don't want to lose it as part of this conversation. It is a business concern today, but it should also be an academic thought point as we move forward. So thank you for bringing that to the table. I also wanted to mention, another thing that we're learning and kind of discussing as we talk about the early learning community, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, the affordability challenge and the business model itself of early learning centers. And you are the chair of the House Education Quality Subcommittee. So one, thank you for your service there because you are quite literally on the front lines of this issue up there at the Capitol. But a conversation that comes up a lot is regulation within the child care community. And look, there are regulations that are 100% absolutely necessary to make sure we have safe, functional environments for our children. But if you've read the regulations and you read some of the coding, there are regulations in there that you would probably go, didn't even know that existed, or I'm surprised, or why is that the case? And you recently held a conversation to discuss some of those repeals to the early learning code. Again, talk to us a little bit about what you learned and why I think making smarter regulations around early learning can help support not only quality, but access and affordability.
That's a great question. And yes, we are looking heavily into some deregulation in the VPK through 12 space this year. And I'll tell you, I brought a prop today. So this is our 2023 Florida School Law book. I think it's thicker than my Bible, and it's a big read. And we've done a lot right. We've done so many things right in Florida, in as far as law and regulation. But what we need to constantly be doing is going back and reviewing what is in law, what we can take out, what we can readdress, and what we can do better. And we don't only need to do this so that we can be a more effective place, for children to live and grow and learn, but we need to do this for our educators too, right? It's just so burdensome. And I think that's one place that we're really looking. We don't want to sacrifice quality, but we do want to make it just streamlined.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know right now we would love to incentivize more people with the right heart and passion to get into this field. And whether it's owning a facility or opening a facility or working as a child care educator, we want more people in this area. But then you go, well, here's the book you need to read to get started, and you hand them that, and it thumps on their desk. And then you say, here's some great news. If you're an early learning teacher, you're not going to get paid very well. In fact, you can make more money in nearly any other field you would choose. It is a stressful job, a difficult one, rewarding, but stressful and difficult. And you're not going to necessarily get a ton of perks around it. You're signing up, or maybe you're telling the child care owner and operator, hey, it can be tough to expand. There's a ton of regulation. The margins are super thin, but hey, you're doing a community good. And again, it's one of those things where let's stop right now having the conversation or pretending that early learning is a public good. It's not. It's a business in the state of Florida. It's business everywhere.
And let's face it, people, you're also going to add to that mix. People are not going to find value in what you do, even though you're doing the most valuable job that there could be.
Oh yeah, we treat it as a goodwill industry right now, as an unthanked thank you for your service type of thing. So it's something that, again, if we want to get it right, if we want to incentivize more people, well, let's be thoughtful about how we do that. So I appreciate you bringing that to the fold because it's an important part of the conversation as well. Something else I wanted to touch.
I would like to add to that, the regulation is important. There's the money piece that's important. They have to work in concert with one another. We can't just, we know that we need to pay people more money. We know what we need to do, but we can't just continue to throw money at the problem. Right. It has to be a concerted effort between policy and funding.
Yeah, something interesting we brought up on a phone call here internally with a partner recently, which kind of caught some eye-raising eyebrows, was we said, talk to us about money last. And they said, what? Bring up the money. And it's like, no, literally we're not saying don't talk about the money. We're saying literally talk about it last. We need to figure out all of the other things that we need to get right. We need to have a thoughtful plan, because if we're going to invest in something like this, we want to make sure it's going to work. We don't get a lot of bites at the apple when it comes to fixing all this challenge that we're facing. So it's not to say to not talk about the funds or not talk about the investment that's going to be necessary, but start with that. Let's end the conversation there like we would if we were doing anything else in our life. So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront, because that's how we're going to fix it, thoughtfully, through targeted investment. Something else I wanted to bring up is that, look, we know right now this is disproportionately impacting low-income parents. We talked in the beginning about, even if you have the funds, it can take you a while to get through a wait list. And then once you get on the wait list, it can take you, it can be extremely costly to access those facilities. And then if you add like the real life challenge of struggling to afford, utilities and grocery bills, it can become a nightmare scenario. So as we look at addressing this issue for low income families, again, how can the business community play their role within their community? Is it, again, understanding the challenges that their employees are going through? Is it investing philanthropically in resources at the local level? Is it extra? Is it different benefits that may be provided within the workplace? Is it all of the above? Representative Trollsey, I'm not expecting you to have all the answers here, because if we did, let's clean it up and let's get out of here. But just kind of what would you say to the business community when it comes to supporting those low-income families? And of course, Alice families, which are noted here as well.
I just saw that pop up to you in the comments, the Alice families. I really think it's not an and or, it's an all. And I would challenge.
Let's do it, yeah.
I would challenge anybody in the business community to go visit a child care center.
It is, I will tell you, it is eye-opening. I've had the opportunity to visit child care centers, across the spectrum. And again, I think what you learn right off the bat is those providers, those teachers within those facilities are truly some of the best people we have in the state of Florida. They care, they're compassionate, but it's not one that anybody is, dropping their name tag or closing their office door to run to go work at, because it's difficult. So I think having that compassion and that understanding of what's happening within those facilities and the value they bring to the community is really, really important. We saw it through COVID. I think a dynamic change in how we treated and respected healthcare workers, which is beautiful. I'm a product of a single mother who was a nurse. You will not find somebody who loves and respects nurses more than myself. We need to have that same level of compassion, caring, and understanding for those early learning providers across the state of Florida, because they are so vital to the everyday function of our economy and really our society. So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront.
I think that what would be a fun and really enlightening opportunity, because a lot of people I see, on this call today are with various chambers, and you all have chamber meetings every week, every month, multiples. I know my chamber does. And how great would it be as one of your speakers at a breakfast to commit to bring some childcare providers in and talk about the impact that childcare facilities, accessibility, affordability, how the business community can get engaged, how they can bring that to the forefront and have a good conversation over a cup of coffee.
I agree 100%, and that is a good challenge for everybody on the call right now. And I just saw Alex from Future Makers comment in the chat, and they're doing some fantastic work down in Collaboratory, really taking a model they've done for career education and moving it into early learning as well. And what I would say is, let's not let this be a conversation that we're having today or something that you have as passing in the hallways. Let's commit to it as an issue that we work on within our communities. And what I will commit to from a chamber perspective is that we will be there to support you, whether it's through, talking to our team who understands the policies and what's happening here in the state of Florida, whether it's talking to our researchers and understanding how this may be impacting your specific community. If you want to understand how many people may be out of work in your community due to this issue, reach out to us. We're happy to help. We want you to drive this issue forward, and we want to be a support to do so. So, Representative Trabolsi, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate your time. Obviously, I look forward to the many, many conversations you and I will have in the future on this. I know they will be beneficial. At times, this can be a frustrating issue to work on, but I'm always thankful to have an advocate and a supporter like yours up at the Capitol, because I know we have somebody who really understands and cares about this issue leading it. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you too. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to working with you and tackling this issue and making some great strides. And to anybody that is on the call today, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to my office, because I don't have all the answers. Kyle doesn't have all the answers. Clearly, the chamber is working with a lot of people, boots on the ground, to find out the issues and create solutions. But you're living it every day too, and we want to hear from you.
Fantastic point to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. The next person I'm excited to invite to the stage is truly one of the most thoughtful and knowledgeable experts on this topic just in the state of Florida generally. In fact, 3 years ago when I started at the chamber, I thought I understood early learning, and she definitely, after a lunch with her, I was like, oh goodness, I have quite a bit to learn. So she has been such a helpful guide in this process over the past few years. So I'm thrilled to bring to the table Michelle Watson, the CEO of the Florida Alliance of Children's Councils and Trusts. Michelle, thank you for being here today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to take the stage with you and the good work of the chamber. I do truly believe that the work we do goes hand in hand, and together as a unified voice, we can get farther faster. So thanks again.
100%. 100%. And that's a great point right off the bat. Understanding is that Michelle is not only somebody that I lean on, but she is a formal partner of ours. She sits on the board of our Business Alliance for Early Learning, which is made up of some of the most thoughtful, understanding business and philanthropic leaders in this space. And you represent FACT. Again, the Florida Alliance of Children's Councils and Trusts. Before we even dive into the whole conversation, just tell us a little bit about what FACT is, who you guys represent around the state, and the work that your trusts are doing.
Absolutely. So we are the membership organization of all of the special purpose units of government that have been created to really support children's issues cradle to career. And I think one of the things that sets us apart is we often say we like to sit in the gaps with the funding that we bring in. We are over to layover programs and evidence-based opportunities to really inform collective impact through dedicated funding. And so when I say we sit in the gaps, what we're able to do is be really innovative, right? Sometimes when you receive your federal and state dollars, they're earmarked for only certain activities. And it's really difficult to think outside the box or think about, if I could just do this one thing differently, what would the impact be? And so our members allow their communities to bring those innovations to the table, determine how they can collectively work on opportunities to solve community-based issues in really meaningful ways. And so what we do as the membership association is we take all of that good work and all of those learnings and that data and research, and we bring it to policymakers and show them what could be done with just a few little tweaks to statute or opportunities to redesign systems in a way that hopefully has more meaningful impact to all families in the state of Florida, not just our lucky communities is what I like to call them.
That's a great way to put it. And, you mentioned the gap. And I think for many, many years, early learning and childcare has filled that gap to a pretty dramatic degree across the state of Florida. And you also mentioned that within the communities you guys serve, you are serving those most vulnerable populations. So I would say, talk to me a little bit about what you guys have learned in your communities throughout the state when it comes to serving those vulnerable populations in this space of early learning and childcare. And what are maybe some of those innovations that might be ripe for kind of incubating?
Absolutely. So I would say that our communities work hand in hand with our early learning coalitions across the state and in those communities, and they are fantastic partners. They are great thought leaders as well. And so I know that work couldn't be done without those really robust partnerships. And so I think you've seen things such as really understanding. I'm going to use Miami-Dade, for example. The Children's Trust in partnership with the Early Learning Coalition have created their Thrive by 5 model. Their Thrive by 5 model really supports families that not are only in the subsidized childcare school readiness program, but ensures that there's continuity of care after they are no longer income eligible, and really works to serve children and families all the way up to 300% of the federal poverty level. what that really does is that really kind of jumps that cliff that we've seen in so many presentations, especially by the good work of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and their modeling of that. And that really ensures that what we're looking at for children's development is usually, depending on what age they come into the system, you're really hopefully able to launch them in the proper K through 12 space with that significant funding as those families are really ascending to economic mobility. With that, not only are they providing scholarships and serving individual families and children above the income eligibility threshold, and I want to be very clear that happens in more communities than just Miami-Dade. I'm just using them as an example, but they also really provide differentials on top of all children in a child care center if they are a trust center. And so what that does is that really helps stabilize the revenue for that child care provider in areas where the market is never going to bear what the true cost of care is, right? So we know that the accessibility and being able to pay for childcare is limited by our budgets. It is not limited by our want and desire for the best of our children. And so by providing a differential on basically the top of every child enrolled, what you're really doing is you're saying, I'm making a commitment to you, and you're making a commitment to the children of our community. And we're going to work together to make sure that you provide a solid educational foundation as these children move into the pre-K and K through 12 space. Never mind the fact that they also ensure that 85% of enrollment is happening within those centers. So one of the things is there's an access issue, which Representative Tribulsi and you discussed very well, but there's also a workforce issue, which was touched upon, and an enrollment issue. And what we know is that if facilities do not have a significant amount of enrollments, and kind of the national standard is 85% or more, their business becomes unstabilized. And with unstabilized, then you're going to see differentiation in instructor recruitment. You're going to see differentiation in educational material supplies and opportunities, as well as just differentiation in the ability to meet health and safety standards sometimes. And so I think that, through the trust and that partnership, they've built a great system. The Children's Services Council in Palm Beach County has done excellent work in helping support workforce, professional development, as well as continuity of care. Their early childhood system was very much the basis for the state's accountability system in both school readiness and VPK as long-term implementers. And so I think that there is really promising practices going across the state, right? Some of that I just know about because they're my communities. I'm sure there's others that are happening that I don't even know about at this time. But I think that is something that is happening, right? Everybody's coming with community solutions, and how do we cultivate and corral those solutions and come up with a master plan that will really affect all of Florida in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and look, you brought up, I noted 6 different things, and I can't touch on all of them from the points you just brought up. But one of them is the Census Pulse is a very interesting experimental tool, which gives us real-time insights to what's happening across the nation and what's happening in Florida. And what we see is that there's a lot of financial stress going on everywhere in the nation right now. Inflation, there's potential recessions coming next year. So we're just kind of looking at what does that financial stress mean. And what's interesting to note is that one of the leaders of financial stress for parents of young children is the cost of childcare. And one of the first things that they do is they look for alternative options amongst childcare to deal with those financial stresses. And as you talk about that instability within enrollment, or the lack of predictability for a center to be able to say, okay, we're at 85% today, but 6 months from now, we're going to still be at 85%. That's a challenge. So, what I would say is, as business leaders, if you're saying, how do I get engaged? How do I dive into this issue? I hear it's an issue. I don't know what to do. There's an avenue right there. And maybe you don't have a trust within your community, but you do have an early learning coalition. You do have resources that you can go and invest in. We've seen philanthropically that some of the major leaders in Florida or nationally have done so. Even if you take somebody like, obviously an extreme example, Jeff Bezos. He has a model called Bezos Academy, where he's actually building early learning centers because he understands how important this issue is. Of course, I'm not expecting everybody to go to that extreme, but there are avenues for which you can go ahead and support families or children accessing consistent, high-quality early learning and childcare across the state. And, reaching out to your early learning centers, or reaching out to myself or Michelle, your trusts, that there are avenues to do so and figure that out. Kind of want to ask you a question just based on your perspective of the national landscape. Because again, when I talk about one of the most thoughtful leaders, you're constantly calling me saying, like, have you heard what Missouri did? Did you see what they did in Kansas? Here's what they're actually getting done up in New England, in the New England area. And that's always been very helpful for me because it allows us to stay on the cutting edge of, okay, what are other states doing? What's working, what isn't? So give me a little bit of perspective on the national landscape. Has anybody gotten this right? And if not, like, what's the value of Florida for getting it right first?
So I definitely think everybody's talking about it, and everybody is deploying tools in their toolbox to figure out, what is the best lever and what does that look like. I think nationally, states that have really hit headlines for their work in this space, New Mexico. So, as part of the pandemic, states were allowed to really identify who were essential workers. And New Mexico was very forthcoming and basically said every worker in New Mexico is an essential worker. Bottom line, we need everybody in our workforce for our economy to be able to recover. And so when those dollars and sunset, they've really made a long-term commitment, not only through funding, but through policy, that they're going to support working families up to 400% of the federal poverty level with access to early education. And I think that that is something that over time, right, with that consistency, you're going to see that early education foundation get stronger and stronger as those children begin to attend their kindergarten through 12th grade programs, right? Because we know if you get the science of child development right, you're going to get the science of reading and the science of educational learning correct, because those are the most important things. I would also say Vermont, obviously a high net worth, very small state, very small population in comparison. They're serving families up to 575% of the federal poverty level. And so I think just the recognition that right now in Florida, if you are a 2-parent household making minimum wage, you cannot qualify for any supports in subsidy for childcare is really alarming. In the fact that we are not supporting nuclear families in a way that they can reach economic mobility, right? And we need to understand that education, K through 12, is an economic support, right? We know it's an educational support, but we found out during the pandemic, if you bring all those children home, productivity suffers. And so I think we need to start talking about early education in the same essence that we talk about K through 12. Yes, it is a continuum. And I think the state of Florida has done an amazing job. In 2021, House Bill 19 reorganized all of the education statutes and created a birth through 20 education continuum. I think that that's where Florida has been first, is really recognizing that there is the ability and that it starts at birth, right? That early education starts at birth and is really foundational. So national perspective, I think everybody's trying to figure out what are the right solutions. Florida perspective, I think we're having really strong conversations about how do we create that education continuum that not only supports the workforce, but supports authentic learning for children.
Yeah, and a couple points to hit on there, because you brought up great examples. One, New Mexico, led by a Democratic governor. Vermont, led by a Republican governor. So we see bipartisan issue. Secondly, economic development, and I mean this, and I can happen to be quoted on it. Economic development or education, K through 12, is the single greatest economic development tool that we have. It quite literally allows the economy to happen in flow, knowing that you have your child in a safe, fostering environment during the day allows parents to work and not necessarily have that stress of what is happening to my family member, my vulnerable child during this time. And to me, it's kind of crazy that it's like, we think about that in relation to where's our 15-year-old, but policy-wise, we haven't necessarily gotten there as it relates to our 3-year-old. So that's scary, and just something that maybe like societally we should be thinking about, because again, it is this economic tool, but just kind of an interesting dichotomy there. So a fascinating issue. And then a point I want to underscore is that you brought up some really great points of places that are moving the needle, but nowhere that's gotten it right yet. Even outside of that, even if you look at New Mexico and Vermont, they're fantastic examples, but they're not competitor states to Florida when we think about our economy. understand the opportunity that that would create for our state. If we had a system that truly allowed for a fostering, enriching environment for education, imagine families that would want to live in Florida. Imagine the businesses that would want to come here because they could say to the individuals that they're recruiting, you're going to have the best education system humanly possible in the United States. And fortunately for us, we've actually gotten it right in a lot of respects. We have the best higher education system in the nation. Contrary to maybe some popular belief, but I think it's been shifting the narrative, we have one of the best K-12 systems in the entire U.S. Imagine if we paired that with the best 0 to 5 system in the U.S., it would be a gold mine with all of the other geographic affordability advantages we have here in the state of Florida. If you added that to your arsenal, it allows you to do things that no other state could really compete with. So I think it's one of those things that if we look at going forward, man, oh man, that could be a game changer in propelling our economy forward. Last thing I want to ask you, Michelle, and it's open-ended, so feel free to take this wherever you want, but we are constantly getting asked, and we talked a little bit about it today, as a business leader, want to engage, how do I do so? You and your partners actually have avenues to engage, but again, you've seen it across the nation how other businesses are engaging. How can businesses use their voice? How can they use their philanthropic dollars? How can they use their time to really help us move this needle in a positive direction?
So I honestly think businesses are the greatest Swiss Army knife in this cause, in the fact that they can use their influence and podium to help educate other business owners and other community members on the importance and the commitment to helping solve this issue. They themselves can use their philanthropic dollars to help support purchasing slots in childcare centers who might not have that 85% enrollment, right? How do you help sustain your local community so there are slots for your employees and or just community in general? And then I think there's really the opportunity to look at what are those internal policies that can help support families who now have young children and even early education ages, right? 5, 6, 7-year-olds, to really be as flexible as possible so that you can meet parents where they need to be in order to feel that they have the proper work-life balance between being productive for your individual workplace, as well as ensuring that they are their child's first teacher and parents moving forward. And so I think that there's a number of ways that we can use business in multiple settings, more than we can almost use the childcare sector, right? They have a very on-brand message. They have a very strong output. I do also want to say, you know, we've had conversations about workforce, and this is always going to continue to be an issue. And it is one of, I think, the individual linchpins in the frustration of trying to access childcare, right? We know that this is a low-wage, high-demand human capital business, right? We're dealing with human capital. We cannot automate it. There's not a lot we can do, especially because we have state ratios that are absolutely adequate. I would not say we need to increase those ratios when we're talking about foundational child development. But I think one of the opportunities for Florida is we haven't really created a career lattice in this early childhood instructor space. So if we can really think about how we create a career lattice where if you are an early childhood instructor for, let's say, 2 years, if we get anybody for 24 months that's really learning about the science of child development, and then they move into a teacher preparation program and it's helping solve the teacher shortage issue in K-12, that is a much better pipeline than what we have now, which is we're losing individual instructors to big box stores, right? To other entities that just can afford to pay a little bit more, versus really showing individuals that if you love to work with children, there's an opportunity for us to create a meaningful pathway that can still be your profession, and we can get you to higher wages. And that really is one of the most exciting opportunities, I think, with really the division of early learning, that birth through 20 education continuum, is the ability to create career lattices and career pathways that are more meaningful, that can solve really a lot of different issues that we're running into today.
I think that's a fantastic point. And, you know, at times in the past, people have fired back, well, goodness, if we're moving them on a career pathway and they're leaving early learning, then doesn't that just exacerbate our challenges finding teachers in early learning? It's like, no, think of any single career pathway. If you were in a career milestone for multiple years without advancement, what would you do? You'd likely leave. That's not, beholden to just early learning. You can think of it if you worked in retail. You can think of it if you worked at any sort of business. People want career advancement. They want growth and financial security, but also growth in mindset and just professional development. So agreed. I think we need to make sure that we have a really smart system for onboarding and growing our early learning educators and valuing them as exactly that, as educators. So Michelle, thank you again so much for joining. This has, I think, been a fantastic conversation all around today. And thank you again for all of those who have tuned in. I really appreciate you guys doing so. Again, I just want to note that going forward, if you have any questions for myself or our speakers or our partners in this, please feel free to reach out to us here at the Florida Chamber Foundation. Myself, Zanani, our entire team is available here to help you in the work that you guys are doing within your communities and also moving the needle forward at a state level. So whether you're a business leader wanting to engage as a thought leader on this issue, or you're a community leader wanting to understand how you can improve the opportunities within just your zip code, let us know. There's avenues for everybody to get engaged and involved. But thank you everybody for taking the time this morning. I think this was a very important conversation, and most importantly, really looking forward to seeing what we can get done this year and the years to come. So thank you, everybody.